The night Robert Miller realized he had been wrong for years, he didn't lose his farm in a dramatic moment. There was no fire. It happened slowly, too slowly to notice at first. One bill, then another, then rising costs he couldn't explain, and promises that never turned into relief. Until one day, silence became louder than hope. The house was dark that night. Only the kitchen light stayed on. Robert sat alone at the table, surrounded by unpaid invoices, loan notices, and numbers that no longer made sense. And when he finally leaned back in his chair, he whispered something he had never said in his life. Maybe I trusted the wrong kind of future. That moment didn't just mark financial collapse. It marked the beginning of doubt. Robert Miller was a farmer in Iowa. Not wealthy, not powerful, not the kind of man people talked about in cities. But in his town, he was known. Not for success, but for endurance. His farm had been in his family for generations. Passed down from his father. A man who believed in one rule more than anything else. Land remembers hard work. Robert grew up believing that sentence was a law of nature. Not a belief. Not a hope. A law. So he built his life around it. Before sunrise, he was already outside. Boots in the soil. Hands in the work. Body tired before most people woke up. Days became weeks. Weeks became years. And years became decades. He never questioned the system. Because the system was simple in his mind. Work hard, survive. Work harder, succeed. But more than anything, Robert believed the farm was not just land. It was a promise. A promise that effort mattered. A promise that his children would live better than he did. A promise that ordinary people like him still had value in a changing world. But the world does not stay still. Even when people do. At first, the changes were small. Barely noticeable. Fuel prices rose slightly. Machinery repairs became more frequent. Fertilizer cost a little more every season. But each year, the pressure increased. And each year, the farm gave a little less back. Robert told himself it was temporary. He had seen hard seasons before. He had survived droughts, bad harvests, and market drops. But this felt different. Still, he refused to panic. Because something else was happening outside the farm. Politicians were speaking louder about people like him. Farmers, workers, forgotten towns, small communities. For the first time in years, Robert felt something unfamiliar. Recognition. Someone was finally speaking his language. Someone was finally acknowledging his struggle. So he believed. He supported. He defended. And when others doubted, he said, "Give it time. Things will get better." But time passed. And the weight didn't lift. It only changed shape. It became heavier. More constant. One evening, Robert sat at the kitchen table long after dinner. The house was quiet except for the sound of an old refrigerator humming in the background. His wife Linda stood nearby, watching him without speaking. Finally she said, "Robert, you've been sitting there for an hour." He didn't look up. "I'm trying to understand where everything went wrong." But there was no single moment. No clear mistake. Only accumulation. Only pressure. Only math that didn't care about emotion. Outside the farm, other families were going through the same thing. Some worse. Some already gone. In town, at the diner, Robert met Mike. Same table. Same coffee. Same tired conversations. Mike stirred his cup slowly. "You heard about the Johnson farm?" Robert looked up. "No." "They sold it." The words landed quietly. Too quietly. "The Johnsons?" Robert asked. 50 years on that land. Mike nodded. Couldn't hold on anymore. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. Because both men understood what wasn't being said. A farm isn't just property. It's identity. It's memory. It's generations of effort collapsing into paperwork. That night, Robert drove home slower than usual. The fields on both sides looked familiar. But familiarity no longer meant safety. Something inside Robert began to shift. Not suddenly, but steadily, like pressure building under ice. He started thinking differently. Not about crops. Not about weather. But about decisions. about belief, about trust. Questions he had avoided for years now returned louder than ever. Had he believed too much in promises? Had hope replaced judgment? Had he waited while the world moved on? That night, his son Daniel visited from the city. He was older now, more distant, but still observant. Over dinner, Daniel noticed the silence. "You're thinking again," he said. Robert gave a small nod. "About what?" Robert hesitated. "About whether I got things wrong." Daniel leaned back slightly. Then he said something simple. Something Robert didn't expect. "Dad, you always told me not to depend on anyone else for my future." The words stopped the room. Because they weren't advice. They were memory. Robert had said them years ago, and now they were being returned to him. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. That night, Robert walked outside alone. The farm stretched into darkness. Same land, same sky, same silence. But something had changed. Not the world. Him. For the first time, he saw the farm not as certainty, but as fragility. He understood something painful but clear. Hope is not a plan. Belief is not protection. And promises do not replace reality. The next spring, Robert made no dramatic decision.
No collapse. No escape.
Just change. He began learning new farming methods. He spoke with younger farmers who understood newer systems. He adapted instead of resisting. Slowly, painfully, he began rebuilding something he had lost without realizing. Control. Months later, a reporter visited the town. He asked Robert a simple question. "Do you regret your choices?" Robert thought for a long moment, not emotionally, but honestly. Then he answered, "I don't regret believing. I regret thinking belief was enough." The reporter asked, "What did you learn?" Robert looked across his land and said, "That people in power make promises, but ordinary people live with the consequences." A pause. Then one final truth. And sometimes no one is coming to fix your life for you. The wind moved through the crops. The farm still wasn't easy. Life still wasn't fair. But Robert no longer waited. Because sometimes karma is not punishment. Sometimes it is clarity. The moment reality finally speaks louder than belief. If you believe justice should come quietly, subscribe for more stories.